We're now officially heading into the second quarter of the 2024 fantasy football season, and that means that we've got plenty of information on which defenses are legit in fantasy and which ones are just pretenders who maybe sometimes can count on a good matchup. And there's a mix of both in here today, so make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support, because I'm one of the only fantasy YouTubers who does weekly defense rankings on a consistent basis. So dropping down to our first tier right here. The Vikings defense is for real. We've got 4 games of knowledge now with the Minnesota Vikings, and the reality is they're not only just physical, they're causing turnovers against everybody. They just played the Packers and they gave up almost 30 points to them, and they ended up doing pretty good in fantasy football. Why? Because they force turnovers and they get after the quarterback. So even against a potent offense, the Vikings defense is legit in fantasy football. Now this week against the Jets, listen, last week I said the Broncos were going to have a good day against the Jets. Why? Because the right tackle Morgan Moses was missing. Well, we're probably looking at the exact same thing with Morgan Moses missing another game here. And that was causing Aaron Rodgers to be under duress against the Broncos. Yeah, it mattered. And it's going to matter again. This Brian Flores defense is so physical. They get after your quarterback and they're causing turnovers on every level of the defense here. So the Vikings defense, they're very safely here against the New York Jets at number 1. The Broncos defense versus the Las Vegas Raiders at number 2. Look, I said it last week. Like I said, the Broncos defense is legit. They're a great fantasy defense, and they're a great defense as a whole. They beat the Jets last week, and I didn't even think that was going to happen. They ended up having a much better game than I thought, and they were inside the top 10 for me. So the Broncos defense proved themselves in a big way last week. Now, with the Las Vegas Raiders, I think they're on the verge of disaster. I think they're actually in disaster right now. The Raiders offense here is imploding. Devontae Adams may not be on the team by Sunday. Their offense is it's not very good. And so with this Broncos defense here against a divisional opponent where it's expected to be a pretty low scoring game, I think the Broncos defense can definitely get another couple turnovers and hold the Raiders to like 16 or 18 points. I mean, the Broncos defense is legit. Pat Surtain is locking up every wide receiver one that he plays. Jacoby Myers really doesn't have a chance here in this game. Seahawks defense at number 3, taking on the New York Giants at home this week. Now with the Seattle Seahawks, they obviously did not show well on Monday night in week 4. But here's the difference between the Giants and the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are loaded offensively. It's so potent. They have everybody. I mean, they've got 2 great running backs. They've got a great wide receiver 1 and a very good wide receiver 2. And even Sam Laporta came out last night. The Seahawks defense, if you take away that game, has actually been really good in fantasy football. They're causing turnovers. They're holding teams to little amount of points, but mostly because they're causing turnovers and getting after the quarterback here. So obviously they come out and play the Giants this week, who the Giants have been functional offensively lately. They haven't been great, but they've been functional here. Now the Seahawks defense gets a break here because if Malik Neighbors does not play, this offense on the New York Giants side, they can't generate anything. So if Malik Neighbors doesn't play, Seahawks here at number 3, and that's what I'm operating under the assumption of. But even if Malik Neighbors does play, they're going to get after Daniel Jones at a really consistent clip. So they'd probably drop down to like top 5. But if Malik Neighbors doesn't play, they got him here at 3 because they can't do anything offensively without Malik Neighbors. Dropping out to our next tier right here. The Bears defense at number 4, taking on the Carolina Panthers here. Now, obviously, the Carolina Panthers look much better offensively than they did with Bryce Young. It's not even close. Like, they're not a laughing stock anymore offensively. But here's the difference between the Bears defense and the Bengals defense. One defense is really good, the other one's really bad. So the Bengals offense obviously carried them to that victory against the Panthers. The Bears defense is fantastic. We have plenty of information on the Bears defense at this point. They obviously made the Los Angeles Rams look like a pretty bad team. They're averaging over a turnover per game. They're averaging actually 2 turnovers per game, basically. And they got a defensive touchdown in that week 1 game. So it kind of inflated their fantasy points a little bit on a per game basis here. But the reality is the matchup should be good. Andy Dalton did turn the ball over. And really, just kind of when you look at the Panthers offense, I don't still have a ton of trust in them to sustain this level of success, especially against a tough Bears defense here. So I've got the Bears defense at number 4 and the Packers defense at number 5 at the Los Angeles Rams. And the reality is the Packers, even though they lost that game and gave up 30 points, they're such a great fantasy defense, they didn't do very bad. So the Packers defense may not be the best NFL defense. They are getting what you need. They're getting turnovers. They're getting sacks. Over 3 sacks per game and 2 interceptions per game. 2 forced fumbles per game as well. So they're averaging 11.5 fantasy points right now. And again, the Los Angeles Rams offense is so not, obviously they're really injured right now, so it's kind of cheap, but they're not getting much healthier. Kupp's already been ruled out again this week. I mean, their options are Tutu Atwell, an injured Demarcus Robinson, Jordan Whittington, and Tyler Johnson. Their options are slim. It's only down to Kyron Williams, and the Packers defense has just been really keen on turnovers this year. So get after Matt Stafford, who's immobile with a bad offensive line, and force a couple turnovers. Packers are easily a top 5 defense this week. Now, dropping down to our next tier right here, the Patriots defense is going up against the Miami Dolphins, and it feels weird having the Patriots here. Here's the reality with the Patriots, though. First of all, their defense is not the worst part of their team. It's their offense. Their offense is inept. They cannot move the ball. We're starting to see that. We just didn't see it in week 1. But we're starting to see the Patriots offense stink. And that obviously keeps their defense on the field for a long time. So their defense wears down usually. But here's the good thing about this week. I mean, if you watched that Miami Dolphins versus Tennessee Titans game on Monday night, it was unwatchable. I don't blame you if you didn't watch it. The reason it was unwatchable is because even with Tyler Huntley in there, they couldn't move the ball. The Miami Dolphins look like a trash team. I mean, they're a dumpster fire without Tua. And Tua's not coming back this week. That leads me to believe that the Patriots hold the Dolphins to very few points here. They look atrocious offensively. So again, Patriots have not done anything spectacular defensively, but the matchup here against the Dolphins is so good that it has to have the Patriots inside of the top 10. At number 7, the 49ers defense versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now, I'll be honest here. This one feels a little uncomfortable because I think the Cardinals are a team that's like hot and cold, right? They're either going to do really explosive work offensively in a week, or they'll come out and give you a dud like they did last week. They gave a complete dud against the Commanders, and the 49ers defense has been really good in fantasy football. They're averaging 3.5 sacks per game. They're averaging almost 2 forced fumbles per game. Like, this defense is playing really good football, and they're not even like at their full health right now. So imagine if Ufunga, the safety, comes back this week. The 49ers would be fantastic defensive play, but again, I'm a little nervous putting them here because of the matchup potential and the volatility of the Cardinals offense, but the way they kind of looked body language wise doesn't make me feel good about the Cardinals offense moving forward. 49ers here at 7. And the Steelers defense to round out this tier at number 8. Versus the Dallas Cowboys this week. Listen, the Steelers defense, they had a not great game against the Colts. And really, I would make the argument it's because Joe Flacco came in. That was the reason that they were giving up more fantasy points than usual to receivers in that game. Because Joe Flacco, I think people understand this, is a better thrower of the football than Anthony Richardson. Obviously not more dynamic athletically, but throwing the football, it's definitely on the side of Joe Flacco. Now here's the problem with the Cowboys though. The Cowboys really are working through one guy, and his name's CeeDee Lamb. So if he doesn't get it going, they don't really have much offense here. They've already been shut down by a couple teams this year. The Cowboys are very, very dependent on CeeDee Lamb. He's a great player, but the Steelers do have a really good defense. So I'm willing to kind of throw out that week 4 performance against the Colts. That was kind of cheap because Joe Flacco came in. And I think that they'll be able to prepare for Dak and CeeDee Lamb at a much better rate because they know what to expect this week with those two guys. So as long as they get shut down CeeDee Lamb, they're not getting any yardage on the ground. So I think the Steelers end up being a pretty good play this week. And then dropping down to our last tier right here, the Chiefs defense at number 9 versus the New Orleans Saints. Now listen, the Chiefs offense has been ravaged by injuries. The Chiefs defense, on the other hand, has not been fantastic in fantasy football, but they still have a really good defense there. Now, here's the thing with the New Orleans Saints. They're showing cracks all of a sudden. They're really, really starting to show some cracks offensively, mostly because Derek Carr is obviously becoming what he always is. Like, he's mistake prone, he gets a little nervous in the pocket, and whenever he gets pressure, good luck. And Chris Jones will cause pressure against this offensive line. So I think that the Chiefs here end up having a pretty good game. And I think the Saints do too. I mean, the Saints defense is at number 10 in the same matchup. It's a Monday night game. And listen, The Saints defense has been obviously much better than the Chiefs have been defensively in fantasy football. Now, 3 sacks per game, I don't know if that happens against Mahomes, but an interception is definitely possible. Mahomes is playing sloppy right now, and on top of the fact, they just lost obviously Rashid Rice. He's not at the very least playing in this game, and by the time you're watching it, he may have already been ruled out for the season. So the Saints defense, even if they don't win this game, and I personally think the Chiefs will win this game, I think the Saints defense ends up having a good day in fantasy just through sacks and a potential turnover from a sloppy play from Patrick Mahomes. At number 11, these last 2 defenses, I feel really weird ranking in here. The Washington Commanders at number 11 feels so weird. They're playing the Cleveland Browns, though, at home. Listen, there's a couple parts to this. The Commanders' defense is atrocious in fantasy. They're getting no turnovers. They're getting 2 sacks per game, right? That sucks. But here's the thing about the Browns. Their turnover margin is poor because Deshaun Watson sucks. He is so bad. That offense is very inept. They're obviously not going to have Nick Chubb back this week. And so I think the Commanders, if their offense can move the ball like they have been, that's going to keep the Commanders' defense fresh, and it's going to keep Deshaun Watson and the Browns in a hole. So I just don't think that Deshaun Watson's good enough to even produce in a garbage time game. Like if the Commanders got up 21-0 in the third quarter and the Browns had to pull themselves out of a hole with Deshaun Watson's arm, I don't think he's good enough. And in fact, I think they could get an interception off of it. So I think the Commanders here, very low floor play, but I actually think their ceiling is relatively good. And then to round it out, the Jacksonville Jaguars defense. They're playing the Colts this week. Here's the thing. The Jags defense is very similar to Commanders. They suck too. They're getting no turnovers and they're barely getting sacks per game. They actually look like a defeated team. So this one feels even more uncomfortable. But again, if Anthony Richardson plays here, he's a mistake-prone quarterback, right? And I do believe that if he's healthy, he will be out there. I don't think the Colts are ready to make that quarterback change just yet. But if Anthony Richardson's out there, he's going to make mistakes. And the other problem that the Colts are going to face this week is that they're going to be without Jonathan Taylor, who got a high ankle sprain in that win versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if you take out the most effective piece on this offense, what are they to do? Because Anthony Richardson can't throw the ball. They'd probably have to run it with Richardson. So I think that the Jags, honestly, could probably get their first win if Anthony Richardson is starting, and this ranking is totally dependent on whether Anthony Richardson plays or not. And as I do at the end of every defense ranking video, I give you my favorite defense to pick up in advance for next week if you have the available roster space. And this week's defense, obviously, they were terrible in week 4. They're getting dropped not only because of the bad performance, but because they're on a bye this week. So coming up in week 6, the Buffalo Bills is a great pickup because they're playing the New York Jets. Now again, I don't think the Jets are terrible offensively. I think they're prone to having bad games for sure. And if their stars aren't performing and Aaron Rodgers isn't looking great, it's not going to be great for every team's defense. But here's the problem. The Jets offensive line is a mess right now. So if the Bills are going to get after Aaron Rodgers, it's going to force turnovers and it's obviously going to count for sacks as well. So the Bills defense, because they're being dropped this week from bad play and from a bye week, they're a great pickup in advance for week 6. So let me know how your team is looking so far this week. And if you want to see the top 30 wide receiver rankings for week 5, click on this video right here.